Hello there, this is Dizzy, and it's time to play some Minecraft. So for today, I want to continue on our nuclear craft arc of making stuff. I want to look at some ways that we can improve our overall fuel efficiency up to 40%, which is not too bad. And I also want to get into improving how our reactor is cooled and explore something a little more elaborate that would let us burn much hotter fuels and get a significantly higher RF per tick, which is something we're going to need in the future as our base and sort of systems continue to grow. So those are the two major things. If we have time, we'll get into one more project, which I'll talk about as we get further into it. But for now, let's go ahead and take a look at our reactor. You can see it's on, but it's not running, which means we're out of fuel. And I've got here LEU 235. Now, if you remember the last episode when we put the control circuit in, we were burning LEU 233, which is slightly more powerful. The difference is about 400 RF a tick or something like that. For our particular reactor, it's only about 40 RF per tick for a single cell. And that was generating about 2000 RF per tick for us. 235 burns a little cooler and also generates less RF per tick. So it generates about 1600 RF per tick. But what I have recently discovered, so let's just go ahead and go put this in our fuel reprocessor. Oh, I did that without any radiation shielding on. How about we put that on first? It turns out the IC2 hazmat suit works just fine for radiation shielding, so definitely recommend you have that. You can see I've already got sort of some exposure. I'm going to need to make the processing chain to make the rad away, but that's a little further out. So where were we? Yes. So what we want to do is we want to oxidize our fuel. So I've got an extra tablet of 235 here. So this is a pretty simple approach, but what you can do is it's basically enriching the fuel so it burns a little hotter. So we make a fluid infuser that takes oxygen and a fuel, and then as it processes it, you're going to wind up with LEU 235 oxide. So while that's running, I'll just sort of explain this setup. So we have here an electrolyzer, which is taking water and splitting it into hydrogen, deuterium, and oxygen. And so then we feed the oxygen into our infuser so that over time we get enough to infuse a fuel pellet, and the rest we just shunt to a fluid nullifier. Now, eventually I'll wind up reusing that, but for now we're just going to throw it away. And this is, I mean, you can see it's fairly slow, so it does take a while. But what winds up happening is the LEU 235 oxidized, you get about 40% more RF out of a single fuel pellet. So to put this in context, LEU 235 non-oxidized, so just LEU 235, you get about 8.6 million RF or 8.6 million RF over sort of the timeline, depending on the reactor design, all that stuff. But that's the total energy you get out of it. By infusing this with oxygen, we turn it into LEU 235 ox, or oxidized, and you get about 12 million RF. So you get about 40% more RF out of the same amount of fuel. So this is one of those things where I think you just always want to do this. Now, you do burn a little bit hotter. I think it's about 12% or something like that. But for our particular system, we should be able to keep up with it. So let's go ahead and let's turn the reactor off first. So let's drop our 235 oxide in. And you can see, like I said, LEU 235, we got 1600 RF per tick. Now we're getting 2300 RF per tick. We are slightly heat positive, though, which is sort of an unfortunate side effect. But, you know, with our control circuit, that's actually not too bad. So let's just go ahead and turn this on. And we should start to see our heat burning, or our heat rising very slowly, though. 60 heat per tick is pretty much nothing. Some testing that I've done, kind of inadvertent testing in another world, has shown that this particular control circuit can handle up to about 4,000 heat per tick over safely. Anything above that, and it might not respond fast enough. So that's where we're at. But a very simple step of oxidizing, you just have to build basically 2 machines, and we oxidize the fuel we already had, and we are now getting about 40% more RF in total, and our RF per tick has gone up dramatically. But just wait till you see what we can do once we cool this reactor with something a little more exotic. So let's talk about that for a minute. Right now, this is an actively cooled reactor. We've got our kitchen sink on top, right? Generating water flowing into it. And that is, that keeps this reactor cooled. Water is a renewable resource in Minecraft anyway. And so, we basically can throw it away in terms of cooling this thing. Now, we could throw more coolers out this. In fact, probably one more water cooler in here would make this heat negative. You can see that was the heat control circuit kicked in. But if we want to burn something like high enriched uranium, so let's just take a look at that real quick. HEU. So high enriched uranium, we'll look at 235 since that's the easier one to make. The base heat gen is 300 heat per tick compared to LAU 235 where it's 50 heat per tick. So when we put that into this reactor right now is just barely heat positive with LEU 235, and HEU 235 is going to be 6 times as expensive from a heat perspective. So we've got to really cool this thing down a lot more radically. So what we can do, and the plan is that I want to use a very simple little mob farm to generate gelide cryotheum, or cryotheum, and we're gonna pump that into the reactor. And hopefully what that will let us do is go ahead and put HEU into this, and we can start progressing up the fuel chain. So let's let that run and build up. I'm going to go ahead and build all the stuff I need and then walk you through what my plan is. And hopefully, I'm pretty sure it's going to work. We'll be able to pretty dramatically cool the reactor and do some amazing stuff. So I will be right back, and we'll take this cooling to the next level. Okay, we're back. I've assembled all the pieces I think we're going to need, and hopefully this will work out as expected. So the gist of it is that we are going to use tiny mob farms, which is a cool little mod, and a blizz to generate blizz rods and snowballs. And then we're going to run those through a pulverizer and a magma crucible and a crafter to generate the cryotheum and to pump that into the reactor. And it's, we're just going to set it up here on the side of the reactor and go from there. So let's just kind of work our way backwards. Let's see, how do I want to do this? So first off, let's go in the reactor and get it set up. So we've got our water coolers in the back. Remember, water coolers have to touch one reactor cell. So that's how they're set up. Now the cryotheum ones, if you recall, well, remember, active coolers have to follow the rules of the passive coolers. So we're using cryotheum, which means that we have to make sure that the active coolers touch at least 2 reactor cells, which means that for this reactor, unless we change the design up, we're going to have to put it in the middle, which means the pipes are going to mix. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to pull out these lower 2 water coolers. We can, I guess, put the redstones back there. And then we're going to put the cryotheum in the middle here and pump cryotheum in probably from the side, I think. So let's put these guys back here. Let's see, active coolers, here we go. Put those there, and then we're going to pump it in from the side. And let's see here, we'll use the hardened fluid ducts coming in from the side. And then we're going to use a servo. Okay, so the cryotheum will come in from the side, go into the active coolers, which are both touching 2 reactor cells per the specification. Just going to drop these red stones up here. And the reason I'm leaving the water cooling in is that if we run out of Cryotheum, our control circuit will make sure that the reactor shuts down. But, once we modify it anyway. But if we're relying solely on the Cryotheum, we won't be able to cool the reactor at all until, we get more Cryotheum, which might be sort of a catch-22. So we're leaving the water coolers in to sort of, they're going to contribute some to the cooling of the reactor, but really the goal is that if we run out of Cryotheum and we shut the reactor down, the water coolers will take care of getting the reactor back to a safe temperature. So that's why I'm leaving those in. And the redstones, they're already made, so might as well just leave those in too. And I don't want to change the number of cells because some of this is also exploring how much can we improve sort of this design that we already have just by sort of affecting the overall cooling scheme. So there's that. And you'll note that, we're still negative 840 heat per tick, which I think is our total cooling rate, because we haven't pumped any Cryotheum into it. So let's go ahead and recycle that real quick. All right. So now we've got our buffer. Let's just kind of work backwards here. We're going to want our magma crucible to melt down the Cryotheum, and we want that to go into a tank so that we have a visual indication of what's happening. And we're going to put a fluid duct on top, and we're going to pump out this way. So the magma crucible will melt down the Cryotheum, turn into liquid Cryotheum, and then that'll get pumped into the buffer. And we'll have a visual indication of how this is doing. We're also going to eventually use this with a fluid sensor so that the reactor control circuit will also monitor that there is some coolant available, and if there's not, it'll shut it down because we're going to be running so hot we can't run out of coolant. So from there, we're going to use a RF Tools crafter, and that's going to actually craft the Cryotheum and feed it into the magma crucible. And then we're going to have a pulverizer to take in our blizz rods. And then all of this is going to be pulled. Let's see. I think I'm going to have a pipe coming out of here. So we're going to put that, put that there, and then we're going to put the mob farm on top of it. So we're using this, a relatively new mod called Tiny Mob Farms, which the general idea is you make a special lasso, then you capture a mob, you put it in one of these mob farms, and there's different tiers of mob farms. Gold's about halfway up the tier chain. And then it just, periodically generates the drops from the mob. In my particular case, though, let's see. Let's just look at this real quick. Mob. I've modified sort of the balance of this mod a little bit. So by default, the lassos have durability associated with them, and until you get to the top, the ultimate mob farm, your lasso will eventually sort of wear out, and the mob farm and you'll lose the mob basically. I didn't like that very much because I felt like I didn't want to have to go capture the same mob over and over. So what I did is I made the lasso durability infinite, and then I really cranked up how long it takes to generate any loot. So this golden mob farm, I think by default in the sort of mod configuration is like 5 seconds instead of 80 seconds. So I really slowed it down, because really the balance I was trying to achieve here is that if the lasso lasts forever, it should take you a lot longer to get the same amount of loot. And the other part of this is that really for this mod pack that I've made, I'm trying to, if you want faster drops or sort of, things like that, you're going to use something like RF Tools spawner and, the mob masher, the mob grinding utilities. But for our cooling system, this is going to work. So I captured a blizz. We're going to throw this in here. So once every minute and 20 seconds, it's going to generate a drop. And let's go ahead and put our void upgrade and our capacity upgrade. So blizz is only drop 2 things, snowballs and blizz rods. So we're going to go ahead and put these in here. I just went ahead and pre-ran this for a minute so that we'd have some things to work with for filtering and stuff. and then I'm going to lock it. And so what this means is that this mob farm will basically run forever, generate these blizz rods and snowballs, and once the drawer fills up, which is going to be a while, it'll start throwing away the excess stuff so you don't have things just popping out into the world. So that's how we're going to sort of get the ingredients for our cooling. Now, the other thing is that Cryotheum requires redstone as well. So there is going to be a manual component still to this, although conceptually what we could do is also capture a witch, make another mob farm, etc. But that's for another time. So now we want to pump these things out of the drawers and into the crafter and pulverizer. And we're going to use filters to make sure everything goes to the right place. So we're going to put a filter on both of these. So you get a snowball and a blizz rod. So the pulverizer is for blizz rods only. So we're going to whitelist that. And then the crafter, darn it. Then the crafter is for snowballs only. And there we go. So that should, let's see. Oh, and then we need a servo to pump things out of the drawers, right? And we also locked it so that the slots will always be the same. We don't have other weird issues. So that should do the trick, and we should, in a moment, because item ducts, because they're kind of slow, start to see stuff coming out of there. Yeah, so the snowball's already there, and where's the blizz rods at? Why are those not going anywhere? Whitelist, blizz rod. Oh, the pulverizer, I bet, doesn't have anything from the top. That's why. And so yeah, there we go. So we want the output to go into the crafter. Great. And this already has power. So let's go ahead and run some power to it. So I'm going to move that. And let's run power to all these guys. And I'll move that transporter just right here for now. And yeah, that should do the trick. So, I mean, it's pretty simple sort of build to get what we want. So we are now processing those. We have snowballs. Actually, we want those to go out as well. So we want that. Yeah, there we go. Now, the crafter. Let's go get some redstone too, because we're going to need that. Just get a stack of that. So the crafter, let's just go ahead and make what we want here. We're going to make the Cryotheum. Now, from a configuration perspective, we want to keep one item in every inventory slot. So we always have room for a snowball, a blizz powder, and redstone. Because what's going to happen is that this guy's going to generate a lot of snowballs. So this is going to mostly fill up with snowballs, but we always want room for blizz and redstone. And actually, what we'll do is we'll spread this out a little bit. Let's see, like this. Actually, let's do it this way. Okay, so now the rest of this will probably fill up with snowballs, which is totally fine. But then we'll always have slots for redstone and blizz rods, which is important. And we lost our thing. Okay, so let's redo this. Okay, so we want to always keep one item in every inventory slot. And then we want the XTC, the external, the crafting operation to go to the output buffer. And everything else is going to stay on the input. So we're just going to apply this. And you can see we're already making Cryotheum. So now we're going to set the magma crucible up to actually pull those items. And there is this auto input mode that you can have. We're going to turn that on, and that will pull things out of the crafter for us. And now it's starting to melt up the Cryotheum. And you can see that, let's see here. Yeah, you can see the Cryotheum going through as it generates it. So with that, we should be able to come to the reactor, and wow, there we go. We went from negative 840 heat per tick to negative 13,000 with just 2 reactor cells, or 2 active coolers. So that's a pretty big improvement on cooling, and that should allow us to do much more exciting things. So we're going to let that run a little bit. And, right now, right. So that's generating. We've got to make some fuel pronto. So we're going to let's go ahead and make the 235. Hopefully we've got enough, do we? Yeah, we need 4 235s, and we need, let's see here. Right. All right, so here we go. That's the 238, 235, and there's our HEU 235. So let's go ahead and take that over. Now, I guess the question is, should we oxidize it first? Yeah, I think we're going to go ahead and oxidize it. We're going to find out if this thing can actually keep up or not. But, you know, 40% more RF for the same material cost, I'll take it. And I think with negative 13,000, we should be able to stay on top of the heat. We'll find out, though. Oh, hopefully we have enough power to do this. So here's the other problem, right? Like this reactor is awesome. It can generate a ton of RF for us, but it is still fairly manual. It's not, you know, we're not at the point from an automation perspective where this thing will just keep running indefinitely. And I don't think we really want to do that yet. I think when we build a molten salt reactor, we definitely will want that. So the other part of this is that we are really going to want a way to have some sort of backup system, because the buffer lets us run the reactor sort of as little as we can. But if, you know, this on a chunk loaded server, if we step away, we don't want to wind up in this position where we can't run any of our machinery to generate more fuel. So I want to also build a battery backup system. But first, let's see if this is going to work. So we've now got our HEU 235 oxide. Let's take that over and make sure the reactor's off in case we are heat positive. Hey, look at that. We're up to 9,408 RF per tick on our same 6 cells, and we're still sort of heat negative. So that paid off pretty good. We went from what? We started off with 2,300 RF per tick, and we're now up to 9,400 RF per tick. So we've got our power going. This looks like it's okay, but the risk we run here now is if we, and you can actually see that this cell can only accept 9,000 RF per tick, which means that it's building up in here. Now, the other problem we're going to run into is that if we are not generating cryotheum fast enough, we are going to overheat in a pretty significant way. So, with that, and why did that shut off? Oh, because it buffered up, that's why. So, that's tricky. What are we going to do about that? I think what we got to do is we're gonna need to tie this tank into our heat control circuit. So that's going to require some juxtaposition here. But basically, what we want to do is we want to add another input that basically says, if we're out of coolant, do not run the reactor. So let's see, what are we going to need for that? We're going to need a tank sensor. We're going to have to move this circuit as well. And then we're going to need to change the circuit design too. So let's first, actually, let me turn this off because I don't know how much cryotheum we actually have. So let's see, where did I put the circuit in here? Yeah, here's our energy thermostat. So let's just go ahead and load it up. So this is the design we came up with last time. What we want to do now is add another condition here that checks to make sure that there's enough fuel in the tank. So let's just, how are we going to do this? It's kind of cramped. Let me just move all this stuff down. And kind of pack it in here. I wish there was a way to make more room on this screen and move around it or something, but there doesn't seem to be. All right, so we're going to have a new input now. And we're going to call this coolant. And then we basically want to say if, so we also want a constant because we're going to compare it to something. So let's make our constant 1. So basically, if we have less than a bucket of coolant, don't run the reactor. So now we need a less than. Okay, and no. And then we want to compare it to the 1. And then we want to add another input to the AND gate and select it and route it in. So basically now we can feed in another signal for coolant, and if that signal is less than 1, no, that'll have the inverse, right? Like that's actually the opposite of what we want. We want it to be greater than 1. So let's delete that, and we want a greater than or equal to. So greater than, if the coolant is greater than 1, then we want it to run. So let's get rid of, oh, there we go. There we go. That's right. So if the coolant is greater than 1, permit the reactor to run. Remember, this is our AND gate, so all the conditions going into this have to be true. And so this is our sort of flip-flop circuit. This is our temperature control. This is our switch, and now we've added coolant. And then if all of that's true, output the right thing. So let's go ahead and save this, flip over to our bench. Let's go ahead and, so we're also going to need a sensor and a fluid sensor. So let's see how much power we got. Okay, we got 11 million, we're fine. All right, so I think I've already got some sensors made. Sensor, yeah, a sensor reader, I'm sorry. And then we also want a fluid sensor. So let's see here. Fluid sensor, it's just a blank template in a bucket. Great, I got what we need there. And then what we're going to want to do here is we got to pull this out because we've got to use another face of it. So let's just pull all this stuff out. So let's go re-encode our circuit with the new logic. Okay, great. And let's see, we're going to have to pull these wires over 1, 2. So I'm going to need a redstone wire. So let's get that, which we have plenty of, thankfully. All right. So we're going to pull this over 1 more. It's kind of ugly, but that's all right. And can't get out. All right, and then we're going to run the receiving or the receiver up to here like so. Let's fill everything back in. All right. And then where did our circuit go? Here we go. Okay, then we're going to put the circuit down. And so now we're going to have our lever on the front. We're emitting a signal at the bottom. We're going to do our energy sensor on the, oh, that's not what I meant to do. Wait, where's our sensor reader? We're going to put a sensor reader on the side and a sensor reader on the top. So the side will be our energy. So let's relink that to this block. And like so, and we've got to make sure we scale it back down to, I think, 5 zeros. No, that's not what we wanted. 0.0001. Yeah. So that'll give us a signal between 1 and 18, or 9, or whatever it is. It's got to be 18. Great. And then we want another sensor reader on the top now, and this is going to be where we put our fluid reader. And in the same way, the fluid readers work just like the energy. You have to link them to a block. So we're going to link it to that portable tank. And then we're going to drop it in here. And by default, you can see this is outputting millibuckets. So we want to scale that down to just buckets. I think that'll do the right thing. Yeah. Okay, so now this the fluid reader will be 1 and 16, I think, is what a tank takes. So now we've got sort of all of our inputs. But now we're too far from our comparator. Well, that's a problem, isn't it? Okay, well, you know what? There's another way to solve this. We can use, there's a comparator sensor as well. See, time sensor. Isn't there a comparator sensor? See, comparator. Yeah, there's a comparator sensor. I thought there was. So let's make one of those. We've got another sensor reader. So now we're going to link the comparator sensor to that block. We're going to put another thing on the side here, and we'll put the comparator in there. And this should output, right? So that actually lets us get rid of that guy, which is kind of cool. This is increasingly ugly, but we'll deal with that later. All right, so our temperature is going to be still on the same side as it was, right? Our switch is on the front. Our coolant is on the top. Our energy is on the side, and we're outputting to the bottom. So let's turn this on. And let's see here. Oh, that was already on. Huh. Okay, so now if we look at this, we can see that our output is 0, which means don't run. We can see, let's see, this 0, 2, and 15. So that's saying that we have enough energy so the system doesn't need to run. Our coolant should be this one, which is yeah, so that one should be all right. So we have, but there is no coolant in there. What's going on with that? Oh, no. It is saying we have one bucket in there, which is strange. Maybe you just can't see it? I don't know. It's not showing that we have any. Oh, why is this not outputting? Well, that's a problem. Oh, because it's yellow. Darn it. All right, there we go. Okay, so that should output. That might not, still might not be enough to make it go. I'm not sure why it's outputting as 1, though. That is strange. Oh, I wonder if it was 1 a while ago. So let's see here. If we go ahead and pop this power block off, that should kick it in. Right, so it's now running because the energy's out. It then shut down because, because the energy stored registers as a comparator. So our remote comparator is working now. And so if I put this back on, though, it's going to drain that buffer, and then it's going to run this to completion as long as there's something in the coolant. I'm not totally convinced that this coolant thing is working correctly, so I need to look into that. It shouldn't be outputting 1 right now. I wonder, oh, it's outputting 1. Let's see here. Oh, it's showing as, I see what's going on. It's showing how much it could contain. We actually want to invert it so that, yeah, there we go. We want outputting 0. That makes more sense. All right, which means that the reactor is not going to run until we build up enough coolant here, right? So that's going to be what happens there. So this is going to run a little bit. I think we've got 10 million RF, so that should be enough to sort of let this run for a little while. And once this tank fills up and the active coolers are good and we get ahead of it, then the reactor will turn back on. It's not perfect. I think this is one of those things where you would really want you're really going to want a little more sophistication, because if you just use the coolant tank, especially when you're getting started, how do you get the thing started? So that's sort of our active cooling build with Blizz rods. And like I said, if we really wanted to make this thing sort of hands off from a coolant perspective, we'd also capture a witch and then route the redstone in as well. But we're just not at that point yet, and I'm okay with a little bit of manual operation, since our sensor will make sure we don't run out of what we need. So you can see right now it's still outputting 0, and if we look at the logic here, we can see that this is the comparator, the greater than, and it's not greater than, so it's outputting false. So this reactor will not run at this point in time until the coolant builds up. So should be reasonably safe, famous last words. Probably a better idea would be not to have a nuclear reactor sitting in your workshop, which we're going to get to, but that's a little further out at this point. The last part of this that I would really like to do, like I said, is to build a backup system so that when the reactor is out of fuel or out of coolant or something like that, we have a significant amount of RF available so that we can sort of recover and make what we need. So I think we're going to go ahead and do that project today and see where it takes us. So let me make some more stuff, and then we'll add that as well. I'll be right back. Okay, I have, I think, built all the stuff we're going to need for this energy reservoir that we're going to build. We're going to be using for this the advanced voltaic piles, which is something that, again, it comes from Nuclear Craft. And you can see that each of these holds 64 million RF. And we've got 2 of those. So we'll be able to basically have a backup battery, if you will, of 128 million RF, which should be enough if the nuclear reactor is down for us to, do other things and get the system back up and running. But this is exclusively something that we like. It's not a normal working day sort of thing that we want to use. It's something we want to have as a backup. So that means we want it on a separate circuit. So we're going to use some energy valves. We're going to do a new circuit for that to sort of control that. And it should, I don't know, we'll see how it works out. But I think there's enough room over here to do this. So what we're going to do here is, well, first off, let's get some power over here because we basically need to be able to charge the battery. I'm not quite sure where the right place is, so let's just go under here and find. All right, yeah, that's perfect. All right, so we're going to pull power from that circuit like so, and then let's see here. We want, all right, so let's go ahead and put the piles down. So these voltaic piles are kind of interesting. They, by default, they're input only. So if you see that that's blue on the side, and if, let me switch this to the other hand. So if I go, wait, does that not work? All right, yeah, so there we go. So that's, let's see, blue is in, red is out, and then green, I think is what that color is, something like that, is no connection. By default, everything's blue. So what we're going to do is we're going to route the power in from the back. We want, so the power will feed in the back, and then we want this cell to feed into the front facing the cell in front of it. So we're going to make that out. We're going to put down the next cell. There we go. And then we're going to also make this one out. So then basically we want the power at either side of it like so. And then, so what'll happen is when power comes in, it'll charge to the first cell and then it'll charge to the second cell. And then when it discharges, it'll pull from the back as well. So the back cell will discharge first, and then this front one will discharge. But now what we want to do is we want to make sure that, first off, we want to make it manual so that sort of tying this into the rest of our energy system only happens when we actually explicitly want it. So we want to switch, and we want to only allow power, we only want to allow it to discharge when we actually, ask for it to do that. So what we're going to need to do here is put an energy valve. See, the energy valves, can't accept, they're sort of unidirectional blocks. So I think, no, that's not going to work. Where'd my thing go? We're going to do this here. Kind of tight quarters. Oh, I know exactly how to do this. So run this power back like so. And then if you shift place it, yeah, great. So good. So let's put this block back. Okay, so basically we want to have one energy valve going into the battery, and then we want to have one coming out, right? And then we're just gonna, I suppose I could actually, okay, well, this one that won't work. So this one has to be like that. And then we could put this on the bottom, I suppose. Let's do that, I guess. Yeah, I like how this looks better. All right, designing with Dizzy. Okay, so let's put these back. Let's see, so this guy goes down like that. Wow, I am very inept this morning. Okay, so we want this energy valve in the back when we are charging to allow power through. And when we're charging, we want no power to go out the front. So basically, we always, you know, until this thing's charged, we want to make sure that it's not also discharging. But when we flip a lever, we want to go ahead and at that point, when we flip the lever, have it start discharging, which means we don't want power coming in the back because we'll be outputting it out and we don't want to cycle. And we only want to allow it out the front. So we kind of want to flip-flop these two energy valves depending on if we're charging or discharging the system. So we're going to need a circuit for that. So let's go over to our circuit design. Let's clear this. Let's get a new schematic to work with here. And actually, I think we should have the energy thermostat in here. We'll put that away. So we have an input, which is going to be a lever. So we'll call this our switch. Now the trick here is that we want to reverse the outputs. And if you remember on these energy valves, you can have it in two modes. One is current flow and the other is restrict, limit our energy flow. When it's in that mode, depending on the redstone input on one of the sides, that will determine how much RF it allows through. So what we want to do is be able to output a fairly large number of RF as a output signal into an energy valve block. So what we're going to do, and the problem is that from a switch, we only get a value between 0 and 15. In fact, it's only 0 or 15. So we need to somehow sort of step that value up to, you know, I think we probably want to go with like 16 bits. So that's 32,000 RF, 32,768, 767, something like that. So what we're going to do is, I think we're going to, well, let's see how we're going to do this. Okay, here's what we're going to do. There is a gate called the Fredkin gate, I think. Where's it at here? Yeah, Fredkin gate. So this gate swaps the upper two inputs when the lower input is active. Otherwise, it emits them unchanged, which is perfect for us, right? Because we want to flip-flop these two things. So if the lower input's active, we want to swap it to be discharging. Otherwise, we want them charging. So we know we're going to need this. And right, so it's outputting. Here's the top signal. Here's the other signal. And then we're gonna go ahead and pass our lever in. So that's going to be the thing that flip-flops these two sides. Now the question is what are we going to flip-flop? Because we've got to amplify this as well. We do have a left shift, which will step numbers up. It will multiply numbers. So it'll take the upper input and multiply it times 2 times the lower input. So if we want to get up to 32,767, which is the sort of max size for a 16-bit number, we're going to want to input, let's see here, let me do some math. So 2 to the, let's see. So if we input, well, 2 to the 16th is going to, we get 2 to the 15th is 32,768. But the trick here is that we're going to get a number between 0 and 15 from the switch. So here's what we can do. We're going to define two constants, okay? We're going to define a constant 0 and then another constant for 8. And then what's going to happen is the 8 constant, let's see, because we want to charge by default. So that means the 0 constant goes in the top and the 8 goes in the bottom for now. And then we're going to output into some left shifters, basically. 2 left shifters, one for charge, one for discharge, which will step the values up. So let's see here. That one. So there's one, and then we'll do the other one, and I'll show you what we're going to do here. Okay, so we're going to remember these guys take the upper input, which is coming out of our Fredkin gate, and it's going to be either 0 or 8. It's going to multiply it times 2 to some power. Now, as it turns out, 2 to the 12th power, yeah. So if we, 2 to the 12th power is 4,096. If you multiply that times 8, you get 32,768, which is as big as a 16-bit number can be. So what we will do is drop in another constant, which is going to be 12. And so what's going to happen is that we are going to, I'm going to tie this in here. And we're also going to use that constant here. Okay, so here's what's going to happen. When the switch is off, 0 is going to come to this shifter and 8 is going to come to this shifter. So in other words, this is going to be our charging and this is our discharging side. And it will say 0, so in this case for this gate, 0 times 2 to the 12th, or 4,096, it's going to be 0, right? So it won't be charging, or it'll be charging, sorry. No, it won't be discharging. This is discharging side, charging side. And then the 8 will go into this guy, and it will be 8 times 2 to the 12th, and it's 32,768. And so it will allow that much current to flow into our battery. So let's go ahead and define some outputs. So we call this one charging, our charging valve. And then we're going to have another output called discharging. Actually, let's call it charge and discharge. All right. So then the output of this guy comes, this comes to here, and this one comes to here. So by default, I got them backwards, didn't I? All right, so this is actually discharge. And this one is charge. Right, so by default, when the lever is off, we're going to output 0 to this bit shifter, which will output 0 to discharge, which means that that valve will not allow any RF out. And likewise, the 8 will go into our charging valve, and it will allow 32,000 RF per tick in to the battery. When we flip the lever, it's going to reverse these two inputs, and then our discharge will be allowed 32,000 RF per second out, or per tick out, and this one will allow 32,000 RF per tick in, or 0 in. So we will discharge and not permit any charging. So it's sort of a flip-flop. Now the last thing we need to do though is we've got to make sure that we're outputting 16-bit numbers. So actually we need to make sure this is a 16-bit input, and then change this to a 16-bit output, and this to a 16-bit. So everything's 16-bit so that we can actually deal with those big numbers. And I think we should be set. Okay, so let's call this our battery control. Put our schematic in, and there's a zombie outside. And let's put our circuit casing in. And I just did a basic. All right, so we need more back planes and I/O buses here. And there's that. Missing a lever. I thought I had one. There we go. And put those in, and it can finish making it. All right, so now we have our circuit. We also need some 32-bit wire because we can't just output redstone. Redstone's only an 8-bit number between 0 and 15, so we need our special wires. And I already have some in the inventory, which is great. Okay, so we've got a circuit now. We've got our energy valves. Now we just need to tie all this together. So let's rip the floor up and do that. Now I think I'm going to put the lever. Oh, where am I going to put the lever? I guess right here is going to be fine. So let me just pull all this up. So we got to run a wire from that. And then we need to run a wire from this guy. And we're going to have the circuit right above it. So then, but I'm not going to expose it. I'm just going to put it underground. You got to make sure that you turn, let's see, it's got to be blue, I think. Why isn't that connecting to that? No, that's not what I wanted at all. Wonder if it's just because Okay, well, let's go ahead and get this set up. So this is our discharge, and the one behind us is charge, the one that we're standing on. So our input's going to be on the top. Our discharge is going to be not at the bottom, but out the back. Nope, sorry. Got that backward again. Out that side, and then the discharge will be out the back. And let's turn that on. Okay, so you can see that connected. Let's make sure this other side's connected too. Yeah, you can see it's blue going in, green going out. Great. So now the lever's off. So charge should be outputting, 61,000 because it's unsigned. Great. Oh, no. No, that's right. Yeah, so we have a limit energy flow. It's allowing 61,000 in to the battery, and you can see they're charging. And then this one is allowing 0 out. So allowing 0 out because we are charging the batteries right now. So if we just test this by putting a lever on top, flipping it, we should now see that this is allowing it to go out, and this is not allowing any energy to return back into the system. So this is working exactly to spec. Now we can just fill in all this other stuff. Like so. I need to make some covers and stuff. It's back to limiting it, so we'll just put the switch right here. And I don't know, I still need to come up with better ways of doing this, but if I flip this now, that changes over. Great, so it's still reading it through that block, and this is off. Excellent. So we now have a ugly but functional backup battery system. And you can see we've totally drained that guy. I did make some more HEU over here. So let me go, and you can see we've now got plenty of coolant. Let's oxidize this real quick. Hopefully we have enough energy to do that. Oh, well, we do, because we got 4.6 million in here, so we can just turn on and discharge that battery a little bit. That'll keep all of our systems up. I hope. Oh, no, it won't, because I didn't tie it into anything. Let's see, let's run some, yeah, perfect. There we go. All right, so now it should be discharging. Yeah, so you can see the refined storage system came back on. Wait. What is that? Sorry, got that switched backwards. All right, so it should be discharging. This is almost done oxidizing, and you can see it's keeping everything up. And we should see over here that this battery is, yeah, it's draining. It was 4.6 before, now it's down to 3 million. All right, we got some fuel. Let's throw this in here. What is going on? This sensor is not working the way I thought it would. I don't know why. I need to investigate that. But that should be, see, it shouldn't be outputting 1. It should be outputting 20. I wonder if I made it too small. 0, 0, 1. Yeah, that was the problem. Okay, so now the reactor should be running. And now we can flip this off from discharging. And you can see that this is now charging from the reactor. Cool. So now we have sort of a great battery backup system. It's going to take a while to fill up, but that way, if we leave the shop or we run out of coolant or run out of fuel, we can always manually flip back on a battery and recharge the system or get what we need going from there. So yeah, that's the whole project. I really enjoy automated redstone. I think it's probably one of my favorite mods for doing these sorts of automation projects. It's not too expensive. it's fun to work with. It's sort of fun little puzzles that you can solve, and you can build some really interesting circuits. And I also really like the fact that there's valves for energy and fluids and stuff like that, because that lets you sort of build systems where you can control how things move around and when they move or don't move. So anyway, I think that's more than enough stuff. This is probably going to be a really long episode, but hopefully you found it fun and enjoy sort of playing with nuclear craft and automated redstone. But until next time, see you later.